The city of Eloria shimmered under the twin suns. By day it was loud and restless, its markets filled with the smell of spice and iron, its streets thick with traders from dozens of worlds. Great towers of alloy and stone loomed over narrow alleys, casting long shadows across broken ruins left from older times. Yet among all the noise, at one lonely corner near the remains of an abandoned transport station, a girl stood. She was small and delicate, her skin a soft violet that caught the sunlight and reflected it faintly. Her hair was pale as silver threads, long and unkempt from the desert winds. But her eyes, large, bright, crystal blue, never wandered. They were always fixed in the same direction, as if she could see across time and distance, waiting for something that had not yet come. For 500 days, she had stood at this very corner. The people of the city had grown used to her presence. At first they asked questions. Then they whispered and gossiped. Later, they ignored her, treating her as part of the scenery, as common as a cracked stone beneath her feet. Every morning, when the suns rose, she returned. She stood through heat that burned her skin, through storms that filled the streets with dust, through long nights when shadows stretched across the alleys and silence weighed heavily on her shoulders. She did not move far. She did not abandon the corner, because she was waiting for him. She clutched a piece of cloth close to her chest, a small scarf, worn thin by time and touch. It smelled faintly of him, though that memory was fading. It had been his gift, his promise, the thing he left behind the day he freed her from the slavers. She remembered his hands pulling away her chains, his tired but warm smile, and his voice saying the words that had bound her heart. "Wait for me. No matter what happens, I will return." She believed him. She believed in him. And so she waited. Children had once teased her, throwing pebbles and laughing at her stubbornness. Vendors had grown annoyed, telling her to leave and not block their stalls. Even passing soldiers had warned her not to loiter. But as the days stretched into weeks, and weeks into months, and months into a full year and beyond, her presence became something different. People began to point less in mockery and more in wonder. Some called her foolish, but others called her faithful. To some she was a story to tell, to others she was a lesson. Strangers began to leave her food sometimes, or water, silently, without asking her why she waited, because by now everyone knew she was waiting for a human. And in this galaxy, humans were different. Humans were strange, dangerous, and powerful. To many, they were enemies. To her, one had been her savior. On the evening of the 500th day, as the twin suns began to sink into the horizon, she felt her strength weaken. She pressed her back against the weathered signpost and closed her eyes. A voice in her mind whispered cruelly, "What if he never returns? What if he lied? What if he is dead?" Tears stung her eyes, but she shook her head. She whispered softly, "No," he promised. Humans do not break promises. Her voice trembled, but she forced her legs to stay firm. It was then that a group of alien youths approached. Their laughter was cruel, sharp as broken glass. They circled her, their glowing patterned skin pulsing with mocking rhythm. "Still waiting, little fool?" one sneered, leaning close. 500 days, and your human has not come back. Perhaps he is bones by now. Perhaps he forgot you. Another pushed her shoulder, trying to make her fall. She clutched the scarf tighter, pressing against her chest, and whispered again, "He will come." They jeered louder. "Then wait until you are old and broken. Die here on this stone corner." They shoved her again, but she would not fall. She pressed her back harder against the post, her tears bright in the fading light. Her eyes locked on the street ahead. Eventually, bored, they drifted away with laughter. But her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. And then, silence. The market sounds grew dim. The air seemed heavier. Slowly, she opened her eyes and looked ahead. Across the dusty street, a tall figure stood. His armor was dark, his face hidden beneath a visor that reflected the dying light. He did not move. He only watched her. Her breath caught. Her heart leapt to her throat. Could it be him? After all this time? Her fingers trembled as they pressed against the scarf. She took a single step forward, her lips parting, ready to call his name. But behind him, the shadows moved. Several other armored figures emerged from the dust, their helmets glowing faintly, their weapons resting in their hands. They were not merchants. They were not wanderers. They were hunters. The girl's eyes widened, torn between desperate hope and rising fear. If this was him, he was in danger. If it wasn't him, then the danger was hers. The street corner, her prison of patience, had suddenly become the center of something far larger. And as the sun slipped below the horizon, the first spark of destiny ignited. The street corner was silent. The crowd that once filled the market had melted away with the sinking suns, leaving only shadows, dust, and the girl standing alone by her post. She felt her hands trembling against the scarf, her chest rising and falling too quickly. Her wide blue eyes locked on the figure across the street. He didn't move at first. He stood tall, armor scarred and dented, dust clinging to his boots. A visor covered his face, reflecting the last red light of day like molten glass. The girl swallowed hard. Her lips quivered as she whispered into the silence. "Is it you?" The figure tilted his head, ever so slightly. It was such a small gesture, yet it made her heart ache. She had seen that tilt before, years ago, when she was still a child. The human who freed her had tilted his head in the same way, as though listening with more than ears. Hope flared inside her chest like a spark catching flame. But before she could take another step, shadows moved behind him. 3 more figures emerged, armored and armed. Their weapons glowed faintly, dangerous even in the fading light. They spread out in a wide half-circle, surrounding the first man as if guarding him or trapping him. The girl's stomach knotted. She pressed her back against the post, whispering, "No! Please, no!" The first armored figure finally moved. Slowly, he stepped forward, boots crunching on the dust. The others followed, their movements sharp, practiced, and hostile. The girl's eyes darted left and right. The street was empty. No one would come to help her. No one dared to be near the corner where she waited. Her heart screamed at her to run, but her feet would not move. She had promised herself she would stay. She had promised him. The figures drew closer, and with each step, her fear battled with her hope. If it was him, why did he not reveal his face? Why did the others surround him like enemies? She clutched the scarf tighter, pressing it against her lips as though it could protect her. Memories filled her mind, chains breaking, his voice whispering, "You're free now," the warmth of his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. The memory collided with the sight before her. Was this the same man? Or was destiny playing a cruel trick? Suddenly, one of the armored strangers behind him spoke. The voice was metallic, distorted through a helmet, but sharp enough to make her flinch. "There," the voice said. The girl, her blood froze. Her legs trembled. They were here for her. The first figure stiffened. Slowly, his head turned toward the speaker. His hand lifted slightly, palm open as though signaling him to stop. But the others ignored him. Another voice barked, "Take her! The queen wants the alien brat alive." The girl's breath caught in her throat. Her hand squeezed the scarf so tightly that her knuckles turned pale violet. She took a single step back, her heels striking the signpost. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The armored figures advanced, weapons glowing brighter. The first man moved again, this time stepping directly between them and her. He raised his hand higher, this time clenched into a fist. The command in the gesture was unmistakable. "Stand down," he said. The voice was deep, human, and clear, not distorted, not mechanical. Human. The girl gasped, her knees weakening. Her heart leapt as tears filled her eyes. "It's him." The others hesitated for a moment, but then laughed cruelly through their helmets. "You dare defy command? Move aside. Human, or we'll put you down too." He didn't move. Instead, he reached up with slow, steady fingers and touched the side of his helmet. With a hiss of air and a metallic click, the visor lifted, revealing his face. The girl's breath broke into a sob. It was older, scarred, more rugged than she remembered. Lines of exhaustion traced his forehead, and a faint beard shadowed his jaw. But his eyes, the same warm brown eyes she had never forgotten, were staring right at her. "You kept your promise," she whispered, though the sound was lost in the wind. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. The hunter's weapons glowed, the dust swirled, the sun sank lower, but in that moment, there was nothing except her and him. The human who had once freed her, the human who had told her to wait, the human who had finally returned. Then the silence shattered. The armored hunters raised their weapons, shouting threats. The human stepped fully forward, his body shield-like between them and the girl. His hand reached his belt, gripping the hilt of a weapon she had never seen before. The girl's tears streaked down her cheeks, but her lips curled into the faintest, trembling smile. After 500 days, she was no longer waiting. She was found, and he was ready to fight for her again. The moment his visor lifted, the street came alive with violence. The hunters wasted no time. Their weapons hissed, glowing with charged plasma, and the air crackled with deadly heat. The girl screamed as the first shot tore across the cobblestones, spraying shards of stone into the air. But the human was faster. Aaron, yes, she remembered his name now, even after so many years, moved with a speed and precision that left the hunters staggered. He raised his weapon, an old but finely tuned plasma pistol, and fired. The shot struck true, slamming one of the hunters backward into the wall. Sparks exploded, and the man collapsed in a heap of armor. "Stay behind me," Aaron shouted over his shoulder. Her body obeyed before her mind could think, clutching the scarf tightly as she crouched low behind the signpost. Her heart raced, her tears mixed with dust, but through it all, a single thought pulsed. He came back. He kept his promise. Another shot rang out. Aaron ducked, rolled, and came up with his blade in hand, a short, brutal combat knife glowing faintly at the edge. One of the hunters swung his rifle, but Aaron was already there, slamming into him with human strength that seemed impossible for his size. He drove the blade into the alien's shoulder joint, twisting hard. The alien shrieked, collapsing to his knees. The others hesitated, startled. "He's only human," one barked, disbelief in his voice. But another spat. "Then kill him quickly." They rushed together, weapons raised. Plasma bolts lit the street like lightning. Aaron darted between them, weaving in movements that seemed almost reckless. Yet every dodge, every twist of his body carried perfect timing. He grabbed one hunter's wrist, snapped it with a crack, then fired his own stolen rifle into the chest of another. The girl's eyes widened. She had heard the stories, whispered across the stars, of why humans were dangerous. It wasn't their size or their technology. It was their will. The refusal to fall, the refusal to stop fighting, even against impossible odds. And here, on this dusty street corner, she was seeing it with her own eyes. Her savior wasn't a soldier from an army. He wasn't a king. He was just a man. But he fought as if the whole universe could not bend him. A hunter tried to flank him, leaping from the side. Aaron caught him midair, slammed him against the wall, and with a burst of fury, drove his elbow into the alien's helmet until it cracked. Blood spattered across the stone. The last hunter growled, charging with a heavy blade that hummed with energy. Aaron spun, blocking with his knife, the clash sparking bright in the night. The force of it sent vibrations through the street. The alien was larger, stronger, armored, but Aaron's teeth bared in a snarl, his muscles straining, and with a roar he shoved forward. His blade cut deep, and the alien toppled. Silence fell, broken only by the girl's rapid breathing. Smoke drifted through the air, glowing red under the neon lights of the city signs. The hunters lay scattered, broken and defeated. Aaron stood, chest heaving, sweat streaking down his face. His brown eyes burned with the same fire she remembered, though older now, shadowed by years of hardship. He turned to her slowly, lowering his weapon. "You waited," he said, voice hoarse. Her breath hitched. Tears spilled freely now, and she stumbled toward him, nearly falling. He caught her in his arms, pulling her close, just as he had once done when he cut her chains. "I waited," she whispered into his chest. Her voice cracked, but her words were steady. 500 days. I waited because you promised. His arms tightened around her. I promised I'd come back. I always keep my word. For a heartbeat, there was no war, no hunters, no city, Only them, bound by a vow that it carried across years in silence. But the peace was fragile. From the shadows, alarms began to sound. Red lights flickered in the distance. The slavers had noticed. Reinforcements were coming. Aaron released her gently, gripping her shoulders. "We have to move. Now. They'll bring more." She nodded, wiping her tears, her blue eyes blazing with new strength. "Then I'll go wherever you go." He gave a faint, weary smile. "That's good, because we're not done yet." Hand in hand, they turned from the corner where she had waited for 500 days. The street behind them still smoked from the fight. The city ahead was alive with danger. But together, they stepped forward into the unknown. And for the first time in years, she was no longer waiting. She was walking beside him. The city of Eloria was never quiet, not even at night. The markets dimmed, but the alleys glowed with neon light, and the towers hummed with alien machinery. Tonight, however, the city's hum was broken by sharp alarms echoing across the streets. Red warning lights flared on rooftops, and metallic voices barked orders from loudspeakers. "They've spotted us," Aaron muttered, pulling the girl's hand. Lyra stumbled after him, her legs trembling but refusing to stop. Her heart was still racing from the battle at the corner. For 500 days she had stood still, unmoving. Now her body struggled to keep up with the furious pace of running through narrow streets, but her spirit was alight. She was no longer waiting. She was finally with him. Where are we going?" she gasped, clutching the scarf in her free hand. Aaron's eyes scanned a maze of alleys ahead, his instinct sharp. Somewhere safe, away from their eyes. "Can you run?" Her blue eyes burned with determination. "I can if it's with you." He gave the faintest smile, but his grip tightened. Behind them, heavy boots pounded. Voices shouted in the alien tongue. Shadows spilled from the rooftops as more armored figures leapt down to cut off their escape. Aaron skidded to a stop, pulling her against the wall. A squad of soldiers blocked the street ahead, their weapons glowing. More poured in from behind. They were trapped. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The soldiers raised their weapons, shouting threats. Aaron drew his blade, his chest rising and falling like a war drum. He looked to the rooftops, measuring, calculating. Then, with sudden ferocity, he shoved Lyra into the shadow of a broken stall. "Cover your ears," he barked. She obeyed just as he pulled a small sphere from his belt and slammed it against the cobblestones. A flash of blinding light erupted, brighter than the twin suns. The soldiers cried out, their visors sparking. Aaron surged forward like a storm, his blade cutting through confusion. Plasma bolts flew wildly, striking walls and neon signs, sending sparks raining into the street. Lyra crouched low, shielding her face. The air filled with smoke, screams, and the clash of steel. When she looked again, Aaron was dragging her through the smoke, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. They burst into another alley, breathless. The alarms grew louder, echoing across the towers. Aaron cursed under his breath. "They won't stop this time. They know who you are." Lyra stumbled, but caught his wrist. "What do you mean?" His eyes flicked to hers, fierce but gentle. "You think they hunt you because of me?" "No, Lyra. They hunt you because of you." Her lips parted, trembling. "Me!" Aaron slowed for a moment, pressing her against the wall of a ruined building as soldiers ran past the alley entrance. He leaned close, his voice low. "You're not just a girl who was taken. You're royal blood, the last daughter of the Ilari line. They kept you hidden, waiting until they could use you as a bargaining tool, a puppet. You waited on that corner because deep inside, you remembered someone who promised freedom. But the slavers, they wanted you broken. They wanted you forgotten." Her chest tightened. Memories, faint and distant, stirred in her mind. A hall filled with banners, voices calling her name. The touch of mother's hand before darkness swallowed it all. Tears welled in her eyes. I thought those dreams were lies." Aaron shook his head. "They're not lies. You are their queen, and now the whole city will hunt you to keep that truth buried." Before she could respond, the alley lit with red. A massive drone dropped from above, its cannon swiveling toward them. Aaron grabbed her hand again. "Move." The drone fired. The cobblestones exploded where they had stood, shards of stone flying like knives. Lyra cried out as Aaron shielded her with his body, shoving her into another narrow path. They ran, their footsteps echoing against steel walls, the drone searchlight sweeping behind them. Lyra's lungs burned, but her spirit surged. She no longer felt like the helpless child chained in a cage. The truth in Aaron's words ignited something inside her, something fierce, something royal. As they ducked into another passage, Aaron pressed her back against the wall, his body shielding hers once again. His eyes were fierce, but his voice softened. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. Her trembling hand touched his scarred cheek. "And I told you I would wait. For 500 days. I never left that corner, because I believed you." For a heartbeat, the world outside vanished. Only his eyes and her tears remained. Then the roar of engines filled the air again. The hunt was far from over. Aaron gripped her hand once more. "We can't stop here. We'll find a way out of the city. And when we do, I'll see you on your throne." Lyra's crystal blue eyes blazed. For the first time in years, she believed not just in him, but in herself. They slipped into the shadows together, two figures bound by a promise, fleeing a city that now burned with alarms and the fear of a queen's return. The alarm screamed louder as Aaron pulled Lyra through the twisting alleys of Eloria. The neon lights above flickered in red warning, and drones circled like vultures, their beams slicing to the smoke-filled night. Lyra's legs ached. Her breath came in sharp bursts, but she didn't stumble. The scarf clutched in her hand whipped in the wind as she ran, a symbol of the vow that had carried her through 500 days. At last, the cramped alleys opened. Before them rose the outer wall of the city, a colossal barrier of alloy and stone, built to keep enemies out and captives in. Searchlights swept across its surface. Guard towers lined the top, their weapons glowing. Beyond it stretched the barren desert, endless and dark, promising both danger and freedom. Aaron stopped, scanning quickly. His brown eyes narrowed. "This is it. We get over that wall, we're gone." Lyra's chest tightened as she looked up at the impossible height. "How?" "They'll see us." He glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the chaos. "Trust me, I've done worse." Before she could answer, a harsh voice echoed from the wall speakers. "Surrender the girl. Lay down your weapons, human, and we may let you live." Soldiers spilled into the street behind them, armored shapes glowing under the floodlights. More poured out from side gates, boxing them in. Lyra's breath caught. She reached for Aaron's arm. "There are too many." Aaron cut her off with a sharp look. "There are always too many. That's what makes us human." He stepped forward, drawing his pistol in one hand and his combat knife in the other. His stance was calm, solid, like a man born for impossible fights. The soldiers advanced, weapons raised. Then Aaron moved. He fired in rapid bursts, every shot precise. The first wave of soldiers fell, their armor sparking as they hit the ground. Plasma bolts lit the street, burning the air with white heat. Aaron weaved between them, pulling Lyra behind cover whenever the blast grew too close. "Stay low," he shouted, dragging her behind an overturned cargo hauler. She crouched, covering her ears as explosions rocked the street. But through the chaos, she couldn't take her eyes off him. His face was fierce, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He was bleeding now, a line of red across his arm, but he never faltered. Every movement carried a message. "I will not fall. Not while you're here." The soldiers regrouped. A commander barked orders from the wall. Heavy cannons swiveled down, aiming straight at them. Lyra's heart sank. "Aaron, we can't." "We can," he growled. His eyes flicked to the wall, calculating again. "We just need the door." Before she could ask, he ripped a grenade from his belt and hurled it toward a fuel container stacked near the base of the wall. The explosion shattered the night. Flames roared upward, shaking the ground and ripping a hole in the outer barricade. Soldiers staggered, blinded by fire. "Now!" Aaron roared, grabbing her hand and sprinting into the chaos. They dashed through smoke and debris, the flames licking at their backs. Lyra's lungs burned, but her legs carried her faster than ever before. She stumbled once, but Aaron lifted her easily, carrying her across the rubble. Gunfire rattled behind them. A bolt seared across Aaron's shoulder, making him grunt in pain. But he didn't slow. He slammed a stolen rifle against his chest and fired behind him with brutal accuracy, cutting down pursuers one by one. Finally, they reached the shattered edge of the wall. Beyond it stretched the desert, glowing faintly under the twin moons. Lyra's eyes widened, tears streaming. Freedom! Aaron grinned, blood running down his arm. Not yet, but close. He pulled her through the gap, just as another wave of soldiers swarmed the street behind them. Plasma bolts tore through the flames, sizzling past their heads. Lyra cried out as one scorched the ground beside her, but Aaron shielded her with his body, gritting his teeth as sparks burned his skin. They tumbled into the sand, rolling. Aaron yanked her up again, his voice hoarse but firm. Run! The desert stretched before them, vast and endless. But behind them, the wall still burned, and the enemy still shouted. Lyra clutched his hand tighter. For 500 days, she had stood still, waiting. Now, every step forward felt like a promise fulfilled, every heartbeat proof that he had kept his word. And yet deep inside, she knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The city wanted her captured. The galaxy wanted her forgotten. But with Aaron at her side, she felt something she had never felt before. Hope. The desert stretched before them like an endless ocean of stone and sand. Under the twin moons, the dunes glowed faintly silver, while jagged cliffs rose like broken teeth against the horizon. The air was sharp, dry, and filled with silence, except for the pounding of their footsteps. Aaron and Lyra moved quickly, stumbling at times across the uneven ground. Behind them, the glow of Eloria still lit the night sky, the city burning with alarms and fire. Distant searchlights swept the sands, hunting them like prey. Lyra's chest heaved, every breath scraping against her throat. The scarf she had clutched for so long now hung loose in her hand, its fabric torn and darkened with smoke. She glanced at Aaron beside her. His arm was bleeding badly, his shoulder scorched from plasma fire. Yet his stride never faltered. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning every ridge and shadow. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice cracking. He shook his head. Later. His tone was steady, but sweat ran down his jaw. "We need distance first. They'll track us." Lyra pressed her lips together, forcing back her fear. For 500 days, she had stood still, powerless. Now she was running into the unknown, and yet she refused to be a burden. "I can keep going," she said firmly. Aaron's eyes flicked to her briefly, and something almost like pride glimmered in them. Good, because this desert doesn't forgive the weak. They pressed onward, their shadows stretching long under the moons. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the crunch of sand and the distant rumble of pursuing engines. At last, Aaron pulled her toward a jagged outcrop of stone that jutted from the dunes. He pushed her into the shelter of the rocks, collapsing heavily beside her. Lyra knelt quickly, tearing a strip from her dress. "Let me—" "Don't," he said, trying to wave her off. But she caught his wrist, her blue eyes fierce. "For 500 days, I did nothing but wait. I will not just watch now while you bleed." Her hands worked quickly, pressing the cloth against his wound. He winced, but let her. For the first time, she saw him as more than the savior from her childhood. He was human, tired, scarred, hurting, and still he stood against an army for her. When the bandage was tied, she sat back, her chest heavy with unspoken words. "You came back for me, even when the whole city was against you. Why?" Aaron's gaze lifted to the stars. His voice was low, rough. "Because a promise is all a man has when the world tries to take everything else. And I made one to you." Her throat tightened. Tears burned her eyes, but this time she did not let them fall. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. "Then I will make one to you now. I will not just be the girl who waited. I will fight beside you. I will become who I was meant to be." Aaron studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "That's the queen I hope to see." Before she could respond, a sharp hum filled the air. Aaron's head snapped up, Lights dance across the dunes, patrol drones sweeping the desert. Engines rumble closer. The hunters had not given up. Aaron rose to his feet, grimacing against the pain in his arm. He gripped his rifle, scanning the shadows. They're circling us. They'll drive us into the open. Lyra's heart pounded. She thought of the corner where she had stood so long. She thought of the cruel voices mocking her, the endless waiting. And now, here she was, no longer waiting, but hunted, standing beside the only one who had kept his word. She rose too, her blue eyes burning. Then we don't hide. We fight. Aaron gave her a sharp look. Fight? You've never. But she interrupted, her voice steady. 500 days. I held on. Do not tell me I have no strength. The word silenced him. Slowly, a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. All right then. We fight. The drones swept closer, their searchlights cutting across the stone outcrop. Shadows shifted, and armored soldiers appeared on the ridges, their weapons glowing in the night. Aaron stepped forward, blade in one hand, rifle in the other. Lyra stood beside him, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight, the scarf fluttering like a banner in the desert wind. The soldiers shouted, their voices carrying across the dunes. But Aaron only growled under his breath. They think you're a prize, he said, his voice a low growl. But tonight, they'll learn the truth. Lyra raised her chin, her eyes blazing with royal fire. Let them come. The desert trembled as engines roared and weapons powered up. And as the hunters closed in, Aaron and Lyra stood together. Not savior and child anymore, but warrior and queen, bound by a promise stronger than chains, stronger than fear. The night would decide who broke first. The desert night blazed with fire. Searchlights swept across the dunes, illuminating armored soldiers pouring from transports. Drones buzzed overhead like vultures, their weapons humming with deadly energy. The air was sharp with the scent of ozone and smoke. Aaron stood at the front of the rocky outcrop, his rifle gripped in one hand, his combat knife in the other. His broad shoulders rose and fell with steady breaths. Blood streaked his arm, but his eyes burned with the same unshakable defiance that had carried him across a galaxy to keep a promise. Beside him stood Lyra, no longer just a girl who had waited. She lifted her chin high, her silver hair glowing under the twin moons. Her crystal blue eyes blazed with something fierce, something royal. She was still trembling, still afraid, but she refused to step back. The soldiers encircled them, their commander shouting through a speaker. Hand over the girl. She belongs to us. The queen's line ends tonight. Lyra's lips parted, and for the first time in her life, her voice rang out not in a whisper, but like a blade. No, the queen's line begins tonight. The words echoed across the dunes. Even the soldiers hesitated for a heartbeat. Aaron's mouth curved into the faintest smile. That's the spirit. The first drone dove, firing bolts of plasma. Aaron shoved Lyra down and rolled, firing back. His shot ripped through the drone's core, sending it crashing into the sand in flames. Then the battle began. Soldiers charged. Aaron met them head-on, his body moving with brutal precision. He ducked under a swing, slammed his knife into one alien's chest, ripped a rifle from another's hands, and turned it against them. Plasma fire lit the desert like lightning. He fought like a man possessed, not for glory, not for war, but for a single promise made to a frightened girl years ago. Lyra crouched at first, heart hammering, but as the battle raged, something inside her broke free. She could not just hide. Not anymore. She grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon, her hand shaking, and raised it. The first shot went wide, sizzling into the sand. But the second struck true, slamming into a soldier's leg and sending him sprawling. Her breath caught, but she did not stop. She fired again and again, her aim steadying with each shot. Aaron glanced back once, saw her standing tall with a rifle in her hands, and his chest swelled with pride. "That's my queen," he growled before turning back to the fight. The soldiers pressed harder, but the desert itself seemed to rally around them. Smoke rose in waves, disorienting the enemy. The wreckage of fallen drones lit the sand in flickering firelight. Aaron and Lyra fought back to back, their shadows cast long against the flames. At last, The commander himself strode forward, towering in heavy armor, his blade humming with deadly energy. His voice thundered, "You cannot stand against us. One human, one girl. Nothing more." Aaron's grip tightened on his knife. His voice was low, steady, iron-hard. One human is always enough. The commander swung, his blade slashing down. Aaron met it with his knife, sparks exploding. The impact forced him to his knees, but he held. Lyra cried out, firing desperately at the commander's side. The blast staggered him, but he kept pressing down. Aaron's arms shook with the strain. The commander sneered, "You will die here, human." Aaron's teeth clenched, sweat and blood streaking his face. "Maybe, but not today." With a roar, he twisted, driving his blade deep into a gap in Commander's armor. The alien's roar echoed across the dunes before he collapsed, sparks flaring from his broken suit. The soldiers froze. Their leader was down. Their weapons wavered. Lyra stepped forward, her chest heaving, her rifle steady in her hands. Her voice rang out clear and commanding. "Leave now. Tell your masters the queen has returned. Tell them the girl who waited has risen, and she will not kneel again." Her words carried like fire across the desert. One by one, the soldiers backed away. Drones lifted off, retreating into the night. Within minutes, the sands were empty again, leaving only silence, smoke, and the glow of burning wreckage. Aaron dropped to one knee, exhausted, his knife still dripping with alien blood. Lyra rushed to him, dropping the rifle, her hands on his shoulders. "You kept your promise," she whispered, tears streaming freely now. He looked up at her, his brown eyes weary but steady. "And you kept yours. You waited." She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly, the scarf pressed between them like the thread of fate itself. For 500 days, she had stood at a corner, clinging to hope. Tonight, hope had become reality. Together, they rose, silhouetted by fire and moonlight, not savior and captive, not soldier and child, but human and queen, bound by a promise that had outlasted chains, armies, and time itself.